How can I improve the quality while improving safety at the same time?
At the end of the day, the information coming in and out of these systems is what makes AI valuable.
We're looking for the highest impact, with the least obstacles.
Hello, welcome to Cisco SE Talks, where we put our largest partners in the hot seat today. And I'm really excited because I'm joined today by Sentinel. I'm joined by Bob and Richard. My name is Zane Mirza. I am your host, and I'm an SE like many of you all who are listening into this. I'm also joined today by Matt LeMasters. He's actually on our team here in Illinois, and him and I are going to tackle this one together. So with no further delay, Matt, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Zane. Hi, I'm Matt LeMasters, and I am an SE here in the Chicagoland area. My background, I've been doing this for quite some time, is data center, networking, software development, and AI. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the folks at Sentinel to go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bob Keblusek. I'm the Chief Innovation Technology Officer at Sentinel. Been with the organization a little over 32 years, so I've seen quite a bit. Started our Cisco practice many years ago, decades ago. Aging myself a little bit now, but happy to meet you all.
Thank you, Bob. And Richard Sonnen. I am the Director of AI Innovation and Consulting at Sentinel. Been there coming up on 3 years, but spent the previous 25 in senior IT leadership, including on the manufacturing side. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So, we talked a little bit before we met today, and one of the things that we're talking about is exactly what's happening in manufacturing. I think oftentimes, you go in this and say, hey, where do I start, right? Who do I talk to? So can you guys kind of dig a little bit deeper? When I look at this, and I work mostly in manufacturing myself, so I break down this industry and who we talk to in a slightly different way, possibly. So if I look at the main characters, I'm looking at it from that finance top level to the plant managers / operations, IT department, and what they're interested in. Because I think in this stack, the two that are going to talk the most are probably the IT department and then probably OT manufacturing along with the engineering side. But then quality control. So can you guys kind of, let us explain to us what you guys see today within manufacturing, within that landscape?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, we have a lot of IT contacts, and that's how we've done business for years. And we're seeing more and more where you'll have executive leadership, and you'll also have the plant managers, you'll have logistics, all collaborating. We're seeing more connectivity between the separated systems, which allows us to do new things, offers new security challenges as well, but it gets the data closer to where we have the compute. And so we're seeing manufacturers say, how can I get a competitive edge? How can I increase the velocity of my manufacturing system? How can I improve the quality while improving safety at the same time? And that's a lot of the things that are happening that I'm hearing in manufacturing when I talk to the leadership in those organizations. And then, Richard, I think you've had some conversations with them through some of our workshops, like our Fusion AI workshops as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the interesting aspects of manufacturing is you'll sometimes hear it referred to as top floor to shop floor. There are almost two sides to the business. So you've got that traditional leadership, you've got the finance, you've got that side, but then you've got the folks who are actually responsible for the work down on the floor, keeping the machines rolling. And it really is a matter of bringing those two together. You've got to have both parties there, or you'll end up with the wrong solution. So we're really seeing, you're right, they're starting to come together. Traditionally, they were almost separated. And I think AI has actually been a real help there. Both sides want it. They both want the benefits that AI brings, but they look at it through different lenses. And one of the really interesting lenses is everything on the shop floor is about reliability. Can you keep the machines running? Can you keep production
Don't take down my line.
Do not take down my line, which has been a great conversation to have, particularly on the Cisco platform, because I won't say that they're traditionally anti-cloud, but they're definitely anti-unreliable systems. And so anything that comes in the middle can be a challenge. So getting those folks, getting the maintenance supervisor in there, getting some of those folks who are really responsible for keeping the systems running is a big part of getting that conversation going the right way.
Mm-hmm. So actually, you said, I like the way you said that, right? That top floor to the shop floor. So if you're going in and you're having that conversation and you're talking to, for instance, that C level, VP level, what types of conversations are you having at that level today?
So they are interested in, I would say, almost the traditional benefits of AI. They want the visibility, they want the efficiency, and in many cases, they want to avoid unnecessary lifting, frankly, to get that efficiency out of it. And that's really a data play. It echoes a lot of what we see in other sectors. So they're going to be looking at, financial modeling. Can I get better visibility into, predicting demand and supply and defect rates? So they're going to be interested in it from that, I would call it the business perspective, that traditional perspective. Very different on the shop floor, where you're looking at this from a, how can I do better, faster, cheaper? So it seems like it's the same, but again, you've got that
Different language.
the different language, but you've also got that different view. I've got a machine that if it's down, it's costing me millions of dollars. Everything about it is can I get that up? And it's actually driving some of the conversations as well. The traditional, can I predict outages? Can I predict downtime? But it also makes them a little bit cautious. And so you have to have the right conversation with them of, this can actually improve your reliability. This can actually improve that uptime and improve that quality, and not just cut costs.
Yeah.
I've seen it too, where, CEOs will come and just say, hey, we've got to get into AI. It's happening across the board. I'm reading all the trade journals and everybody's into AI, but they don't really have a good plan. So we've developed workshops to where we walk them through those. We're looking for the highest impact, with the least obstacles. Everybody's worried about the data, right? They're worried about the latency of decision making. They're worried about the safety of the equipment, but they all want to improve the velocity. So we've had other manufacturers come to us say, hey, we're building the line of the future. In this particular case, they had some machinery worldwide that was 40 years old. It doesn't have a smart PLC or anything on it. But where they're looking at the line of the future, they're looking at modern PLCs, they're looking at connected devices, and then they want to retrofit that into some of the older equipment because it's still useful for making the product that they're producing. In those cases, the conversations are wonderful because they're really talking about increasing velocity, increasing safety, increasing quality. In many cases, we had a drug manufacturer who was doing a new drug pilot, blood plasma pilot. And essentially, if they lost one line, it wasn't about stopping the line and stopping productivity. If there was one hiccup in that line, it would ruin at least $1 million of product. And it wasn't even FDA approved yet. So they're producing this to get through FDA approval for multiple years. And there's a huge cost sometimes when a line gets disrupted. So playing on what Richard had talked about, increasing the reliability, the uptime of the product getting through the line is super critical. So I think it's different businesses have different needs. There's some lines that may be able to stop. Sure, it slows production, but it doesn't destroy a whole lot of product. And then you have the other scenarios where you could lose $1 million by just that line having a problem because it's a high impact drug. And that type of thing is even more important. So you'll obviously see more spending there first than you will in the other use cases where it might be, a little less impacting when you have those kind of hiccups.
Yeah, and Bob, just jumping in here, I'm really glad you said that because, if you just take a step back for just a second, you're talking to engineers today, you're talking to executives who are kind of listening in, right? Both internally and at the partner level. When you look at, customers who are going down the AI train, Cisco actually did an internal report. It's called a readiness report. And there's initiatives to go down that route. A couple of things that are top of mind that are sort of barriers, right? Or just, hey, it's a different muscle that we're not used to. Number one is security. Are you secure enough to go down that initiative, right? That approach. Number one, and then number two is skill set. Do you have the team to deploy it, right? So I would love your perspective, talking to different, C-suite folks and engineers for you, Richard, and how those conversations can vary often as well.
I think, there's a couple different things with security, but, one of it would be, the regular cybersecurity. These have been traditionally disconnected networks. That's how they've done it. They firewalled them off. They keep them completely disconnected. They buy two separate networks. Well, that sort of competes with the fact that you want to try to use real-time data to make decisions and attach to AI or attach to a cloud that's providing AI. So there's a surge in localization of the data, or even edge processing, like your unified edge device that's coming out with GPUs.
Like segmentation, micro segmentation, right? Being able to make sure that these devices can only get the information that's needed.
Right. Yeah. So we definitely have those conversations. A lot of in the Cisco world, we'll be talking about ICE, we'll be talking about segmentation, smart segmentation, and then resilience. We talked about how important it is to have a resilient system to support these needs, and then localization of GPUs. But the other big aspect that I think everybody's worried about is the data. Yeah. And I think, Richard, you have how many data security conversations about these?
Absolutely. Data has become core, not just because it's the real value here. At the end of the day, the information coming in and out of these systems is what makes AI valuable. But it is traditionally segregated. It's traditionally just isolated. You can't get to it, and that's why it's secure. That's just not realistic anymore. So we're now seeing, how do we carefully and safely get into these networks, in or out? You're right. We're seeing it on the edge. We're seeing it on a lot more of the smart networking, where it's not just a hard line, but you can actually move data in and out effectively. You also mentioned kind of the where everyone is, where the path is, and that's a great segue to kind of the maturity models. I know, Cisco, of course, has one on AI maturity. We, in fact, use it, but that's a great starting point for this. To your point, Bob, you've got some folks who they are spending millions of dollars per run. They are probably going to be fairly high in that maturity, or at least they're going to strive for it. We're also seeing folks who are much lower in that. They just want to get in and they're not sure where to. So when we're having those conversations, that's often around goal setting. It's around, what does good look like with AI? What value does AI bring? And those can be fascinating. So you have different approaches depending on where they are in that maturity model. And that's probably the number one thing I would say, when you're working with a client, is either formally or informally assess where they're at, because that's going to drive a lot of the conversation around AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really exciting that you said that, because I can just speak for myself here, and Matt, I would think you'd agree here, is that Sentinel is very top of mind with these conversations, partnered directly with Cisco, right? We have these conversations on a manufacturing plan, in retail and healthcare. I know today we're really focused on manufacturing, but that partnership is really strong. It's aligned, where we kind of go to bat together. I'm sure Bobby can speak to that as well, because it's really having these different persona conversations. You're not just talking to your typical network engineer. Now you're talking to an AI committee, the security team, kind of all aligned together, versus in the past we would kind of work in silos. So I'm really glad that you kind of peeled the onion a little bit of the different layers of AI conversations that we're kind of having.
Yeah, and we created, I mentioned it before, the Fusion AI workshop that we have. That's really about how are we going to apply AI to your business? What's your lowest hanging fruit? What are the use cases that'll really drive the business? But we also created an OT security workshop as well. So we offer these at no charge. So we'll sit down and we'll have a meaningful conversation with the business and talk about new ways to secure OT and to secure the networks without having to keep them completely separate from one another, because we want to bring that data together. Because what we're hearing from the top floor is that they want visibility across the manufacturing globally. They don't want to just see one plant that's smart. They want to see it worldwide. They want things like Splunk dashboards, for example, that can tell them what the productivity levels are, when is maintenance required, when are we going to have an outage, what can I expect production to be, today, this month, this week, whatever their metrics are. They want to see those and they want a dashboard. Well, you can't get to those without connectivity and without bringing
it's all about the data.
Yeah, it's all about that data. So getting it into a data lake, a data warehouse, getting into Splunk as an example. But it's all happening so quickly at the edge that you have to do a lot of processing there in the plant. And when we're talking about security too, Zane, we're talking about some of the requirements as far as compliance goes as well. So if you have European plants, and we have a lot of manufacturers where they might be headquartered in the United States, so we're having conversations with the executives here, but they also are in Europe where they're under NIS2 type requirements. So we're helping them translate what their compliance requirements are, because often the stakeholders in the U.S. aren't even aware that there's these laws and requirements in Europe, for example, that have to drive them to certain types of security and certain types of decisions, because they're now considered important infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And under that, there's different regulatory requirements that we help make them aware of as well, so that they can become compliant as we go through a roadmap towards security maturity.
It's a really large conversation. So when you're going through, you talk a little bit about data governance, right? We're talking about where do we do the work, right? So how do you manage that part of it? Because you say more and more of that is going to the edge. What does that edge look like? And when you're talking about it with a customer, how do you solve for that piece? Because like you said, they may not want to go to the cloud.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, traditionally, machine learning, AI is not really new to manufacturing. If I step that back a second, machine learning has been there for years. Predictive maintenance in machinery, that's not new. Seeing it at a global viewpoint and at a more of a real-time level, and then predictive maintenance has gotten more intelligent because machine learning now can apply things like AI to it to make more intelligent decisions versus just something off of an algorithm from the past. That's where we're seeing it be applied, but that has to happen at speed. And this is going to drive the need for having GPUs at the edge. I mean, we can get them there with servers, and often these plants do have servers. Maybe it's for authentication or for different purposes. So you can get them there for that. But the unified edge device that you've recently announced, I'm pretty excited about that device because a lot of manufacturers are going to want to put that out in the plants. Some of the things that we've talked to them about is, getting that data centralized, but at the same time, it's going to come with some latency. And those decisions can't wait for that latency to be made without disrupting the plant. I think, Richard, you've had a number of conversations with manufacturers to optimize the plants in that way.
Absolutely. So they're really focused on, it's kind of back to that reliability side, but it's also the data volume. I look at this as kind of a tiered approach to data. Who needs what when? They need that data instantly. It needs to be microseconds in many cases. The business as a whole, it may be minutes or even days. So that's often driving some of these architectural conversations as well. What needs to be at the edge? What can be traditional? What needs to be accelerated? Because a lot of the older machine learning was also, I will say, computationally lighter than the modern material.
Yeah.
So they're also having to get used to that and bring in, the hardware that we're now taking as standard. They may be running on that 10-year-old PLC. We can bring it in and say, look, we can do so much more with that data here on-prem, data that you were probably discarding because you couldn't process it fast enough. But we're also keeping that safety net there of it's still here, it's still being processed locally, but we're then using those other tools that you mentioned to give that visibility out into that top floor conversation. That approaching it from that direction often really helps the conversation with the plant managers, with the folks who are responsible for not losing $1 million worth of product.
Yeah.
They can make that decision much more easily and saying, no, it's going to stay here. It's the world I understand, but I'm still going to give the executives, the business intelligence team, the access to the data that they need. Now you're also going to be cutting it down. The BI folks don't want 1 million points a minute. They don't need it. AI actually has a role there too. What data is relevant? Are we doing anomaly detection at the edge so that we can simply put the anomalies out and make it much more actionable? We've seen that within the Smart platform. We've seen it within a lot of the newer data platforms.
Presenting the right data to the right people,
Absolutely.
Right? You have these huge data lakes, but not everything is for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have a data lake that's a mile wide and a mile deep, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
What you need to know is what's important.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think of it as, and maybe you'd agree or not, I look at it as you're looking backwards to predict forwards. So AI is trying to predict forward. We're trying to predict maintenance schedules. We're trying to predict productivity. We're trying to make decisions on the fly. But that data lake, that warehouse of data, helps it to be trained and then to predict what's going to happen forward. And then it gets smarter and smarter. So as that data that it was predicting forward actually becomes real data and gets shuttled up to the larger data lake, then you do retraining on that model, to have a better visibility of what's been happening in the past to predict what you want to have happen in the future. And that's why I think you're getting a smarter and smarter factory at the end of the day.
I mean, and to bring all this together, as an example, right? Let's take computer vision, right? We talked, right? Manufacturers have been using machine learning forever, about 10 years, whatever.
Forever.
Yeah, it's a long time in our world, right?
Yeah.
This has actually augmented and changed so much from when it started to now, right? Can you talk a little bit about, how computer vision is used today? And then let's bring all of these pieces together to kind of show, the data, what data matters the most.
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
From this, because if you're looking at defects, what happened, right? You can start to analyze and understand quicker about what's happening before it
Right.
gets there, right?
Right. Well, I mean, it's a couple different things. I mean, just the optics, the quality of the optics has changed. So if you look at, I remember seeing it years and years ago, like Dole, where they'd have fruit going across a line and it would look like here's the ideal fruit, do some simple measurements, some simple things, and it would discard some and it would let the others go through. Well, that was good information. It was doing machine learning and it really worked. It's very effective. But now imagine you're doing 8K cameras at high speed. I mean, just the size of the file that it has to evaluate is massive. You can't shuttle that image up and then eject that orange off of the platform at the cloud. That's going to have to happen locally. Those decisions are going to have to be. So you have a trained data model that resides locally, and it can be a small language model. It doesn't, general purpose large language model isn't optimized for that.
Yeah.
These are industry specific models that may not be very large, but they need to be trained and they need to respond very quickly. And that's the difference today. And those files get bigger and bigger. We see it in healthcare as well. Imaging files, when it's looking through imaging files, the resolution, even when it's looking through your body, not just an image, a traditional camera image, they're massive now. That's why we sell them a lot of storage, which is wonderful for us. But then what do you do with those image files? It's no different than in manufacturing, same challenges that you have in healthcare. Possibly the latency could be a little different because if you look at an image file, you're not making a decision right now for whether that's a good piece of fruit or a bad piece of fruit. Whereas in manufacturing, that's happening at high speed. And you want it to happen at higher and higher speeds because you want to increase the throughput of the factory.
Yeah.
And that's really going to be driving a lot of advancements in the leading manufacturers that want to have a competitive edge.
I think it's also a great point, kind of between two of your last ones. Manufacturing is a little bit unique in that they often cannot use off-the-shelf models. Either they don't exist or they're just not relevant to that particular item. So they are being forced far earlier than many other industries to say, how do I become competent at actually training my own models and continually training them? It's not just a one-off of, I bought the pineapple sorter algorithm and I'm good now. It's constantly changing.
It's never actually done, right? Because as you use the model, you're going to detect anomalies, what have you, that you're going to continuously train for, right? So you can get a better and better model.
Absolutely. And that often is a different hardware play as well, because that is probably going to be off the shop floor. That is going to be living off the data lake.
Yeah.
And it's probably a different team helping keep it there. That can be a great conversation as well of how do we do ML ops? How do we keep those models up and running? How do we keep them tuned? How do we automatically detect when the performance is slipping? Because perhaps your product changed a little bit. That happens. And so your model went from 98% to 92%, and you're rejecting product that you shouldn't be. Great conversation to have. And they often don't think about it because they're, again, used to those older models where they were probably provided by a vendor. And they were good enough. Well, they're not really good enough anymore. So it's a new opportunity for them.
Yeah, and another big point that Bob, I think you mentioned was just a unified edge, where obviously Cisco announced that product just recently, and the use cases vary from retail, manufacturing, healthcare. From just a manufacturing perspective that you kind of mentioned, the spikes in energy and consumption, right, and having a platform like that is very, very critical. So I wonder, from your perspective and the customers that you're kind of talking to, what other use cases are you kind of seeing specific to unified edge?
It's mostly for that speed, that unified edge. I think in some cases you'll be able to even use that as a starting place for your AI initiatives. Rather than buying a whole data center full of GPUs, you may train in the cloud, but then use the edge to do some of that RAG, do some additional research, or do some high speed analytics. However, I think it can also be used sometimes at a central point to get started, depending on the use case.
Yeah, that's a great point. And a lot of it just comes down to visibility. Am I seeing those spikes? How do I kind of enable AI to help me help the team from that perspective? So again, I think that was a great point. So thank you for kind of talking about the different evolvement of AI, because of just the velocity of change that we're almost seeing weekly, daily, and even monthly, right? So things are changing pretty fast. So it's exciting to see that we're moving as fast, or trying to move as fast as AI is.
Yeah, that unified edge also has a lot of storage capabilities. So I think that's going to be a benefit as well, so that we can localize that storage. We can shuttle it up to the central whether that's in their data centers or in the cloud. And then we can maintain that storage level so that there's enough space and enough performance at that edge for the machines to continue to generate that data. But, going back to something you said earlier, we need connectivity of the machines to the IT systems. That's where we get into the segmentation and the security conversations, because, security could be a real disaster, not just disrupting the line, but harming people, harming employees as well, depending on what kind of disruption it puts into the plant. So there's a safety factor to the security as well from a human lives perspective.
Yeah, safety is not optional. It really does have to be baked in from the beginning.
Yeah. So I love that statement, right? Because as things are evolving, you almost have to re-engineer what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not hey, I'm just going to go do this.
Mm-hmm.
So especially with manufacturing the way it is now, right? A lot of these facilities have been up for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like? How do you take a customer, a manufacturing customer, from, okay, I've been doing it this way for 10 years, right? And now as I'm trying to get more information out, and I need to start looking at this from a different perspective, what's that journey look like, right? And who are you talking to in that journey specifically? Because like you said, this is not only is it expensive if something happens, but it's also a safety concern.
We're seeing two different paths. So it kind of depends on where they're at. I suppose the ideal is almost a greenfield. You mentioned a customer who wanted the plant of the future. They had that opportunity. They actually had some substantial expansion going on. And so they were able to use that almost as a opportunity to design the future.
Like create a gold standard, right?
Yeah,
it's like almost like
it became, this will be everything going forward, and that can be retrofit. That's wonderful when it happens, and great, take the opportunity when you can. 9 times out of 10, of course, these plants have to stay up. They're incremental.
Yeah.
So what you really start with is, and you mentioned the workshops we do, part of it is just the art of the possible. It is, what does success look like here? What could it look like here? Sometimes they are so used to viewing it in the traditional ways, and what was good enough 10 years ago, they may not even realize how much it shifted. So we often start with that. What would success look like? Getting excited about that. Then, like everything else in AI, it's really iterative. It's proof of concept. It's, can we do it on one line? Can we do it on one system? And then grow, because you do need to iterate. You do need to come back together. And although that sounds like a negative when you're talking to someone, like, oh, well, we'll have to figure out how to get it right. They're actually really used to thinking of things that way.
That's part of the engineering and engineering in general. It is.
Yeah, they've got to deal with the real world. They're used to that. So they actually approach that really well of, we're going to need to iterate. We're going to need to start small. We're going to need to prove it out. And then we're going to get better and better and better. And that resonates with that audience, particularly the shop floor.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So kind of going into it, and I think that we've kind of hit on a little bit, but where do you see it in the next 12 months? Like, what big jumps are you seeing from now where we are today? Because if you look at where we are right now compared to 24 months ago, wow, that's a huge jump.
Yes.
Right. But from an AI perspective, where do you think the next adoption point is for manufacturing? And this could be both throughout the entire stack for both the top floor and the shop floor.
I would say it's probably going to be adoption of what is currently, I'll call it research. It's not necessarily going to be a quantum leap. It is going to be seeing the value, kind of back to that, like the retraining that we talked about, of it's now gotten so much better. I don't want to say we can't ignore it anymore, but it's now such an improvement that we need to take it on. So it's less that the technology itself is going to be radically different. It's going to be that the technology that has been available but has not been adopted is going to be adopted. It is going to move into at the edge. It is going to move into replacing legacy systems with these more modern systems and the capacity that needs to go with that. So that's really where I see it in the next year. Iterative growth, but probably accelerating because it's proved its value. There are always the unicorns out there, the folks who are working right at the edge. They've shown it works. So now it's starting to actually move into more of the middle of the maturity model. That's where I think it's going to go anyway.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of recognition of the data readiness as well for AI, and the data not readiness for AI, I guess, is where you would start with. So we're having a lot of conversations about building that data warehouse, that data lake house, however you want to term them these days, to capture that data. And it's not just machine data. Most of the manufacturers we work with, they also have a call center for support. They also have a knowledge base that they're utilizing. So things like generating knowledge through case management, case summarization, so that your knowledge base is constantly growing, and then giving people access to that knowledge base. Some of the things that you'll see in platforms like we use ServiceNow, they have their AI that does that for us as well. So your knowledge base is getting smarter, generated by AI. Well, that's happening for manufacturers. And then also the first line of calling in to get support. They don't have unlimited funds to staff humans around the clock. So more and more, you're going to see AI answering the first call and doing it effectively. And once it taps into the knowledge base, to be able to give users answers more quickly as they're trying to put together your product or whatever it might be that you manufacture. So we've talked a lot about the plant floor automation, which offers a lot of unique things like the localization of the GPUs to make rapid decisions, low latency. But I think contact center technology is a big one in manufacturing that Cisco's really got an advantage on with the WebEx contact center product. And then human resources, depending on the size of the organization. We're having a lot of conversations around different areas within manufacturing that cross verticals, no doubt about it. It's not unique to manufacturing, but they are starting to adopt all of those technologies, or at least talk about those as part of their roadmap. But it all comes to the data. They usually don't have the data centralized, organized, tagged, secured in order to properly train these models. And that's where we're getting a lot of people started.
Yeah, that's a big job.
It's a huge job.
Yep. And that's a great point, because things are the evolution that we just kind of talked about. It's happening with manufacturing, and it kind of varies with other verticals. But to your point, Bob, manufacturing, you're just seeing it. It was a journey, now it's adoption. Now it's going to change once again. So it's something that's you kind of talk about continuous change, and that's exactly what that is, right? So as we kind of pivot a little bit, we have another section of the podcast, which is really, really exciting. It's a lot of fun. It's called two AI facts and one hot take. Really puts us on the spot, and really makes this conversation even more fun than it's already been. So with that, Richard, I will give you the floor to name out 3 statements, and then Matt's gonna actually jump in and show his AI prowess. So Richard, I'm gonna go ahead and give you the mic once again.
All right. Well, I will I'll try to pick something not too hard.
It's okay.
So at this point, we talked about all the evolutions going on. Most Fortune 500 companies have replaced their traditional corporate search with agentic AI.
Yeah. I love this. So I looked at this, and I was actually going to bring this up in one of your other areas. Agentic AI, right? Consider multimodal. The way that we work with data today and workflows, I think, is utterly amazing, right? So, I think it's going to continue. I think most companies right now they hear it, they see it, they have an agenda. They don't know exactly where to go with it yet. It's almost like a solution without a problem, but people will find those problems for it. And we have a lot of tools right now that make it easy to actually build these types of workflows. So, and you can actually take this right back down to that manufacturing piece. How do you take multiple pieces of data from different places and then be able to present that data in a way that's never been presented before, because it was air gap, because it was, right, people didn't have access to it, and create those dashboards to understand data more, right, to understand specific pieces of it that maybe the business has never actually seen before. So this is an area that I think I oftentimes think of things like 6, 12, 18 months, right? This is, I don't like, if you look at 12 months, especially in manufacturing, especially in data analysis, this is going to be huge. I actually have a customer that does this in almost every single segment of their business today. So they're actually creating MCPs that go out, right, just to make it easy to be able to get into each system and pull that data so that they can now present it to the business and say, to have a better understanding of what each one of their businesses is doing. So I think this is an extremely exciting time for this, right? And before really like agentic, I always say like more like multimodal, right? Because you're having multiple agents do the job. So yeah.
You're absolutely correct. Not true yet.
Not totally.
Yeah.
We're there. We're headed there.
We are going to get there. All right. Most organizations underestimate the cloud costs of deploying AI systems.
Yeah. Wow. I've done the same thing. So I play a lot with AI, and sometimes like you're going through and you're doing this work, especially as you get into more of the thinking models, right? You're just running through tokens. I think there's a real big difference between what you see in testing and learning, and then once you actually finish, right? So the cloud is the easy button.
Yes.
Right? That's where you're going to learn.
Yep.
Because you don't know how to build it, you don't know what to use. You kind of have to fall down a few times, right, before you exactly know where you're going to go. But I think that you outgrow it from a cost perspective rather quickly. And I don't know exactly where each customer is in this specific point, but I think that you will see more and more companies realizing that because the more you do with it, right? You're billions of tokens, right? It's like you're just that those costs are going to skyrocket.
Particularly with the genetic, as
Yes.
you know from your experimentation, it hockey sticks.
If you're running, you're going through maybe 5 or 6 different versions of a system. It is exponential, right? Your cost can become quite high.
Yeah, I try to hide my purchasing from Bob so he doesn't see those prices. Absolutely correct. And I would also expand. It has a point. It is still good for learning. And I think most people have not yet reached this point because they haven't deployed enough to realize that cost.
They're doing small scale.
Yep.
But the minute it hits, well, I was going to say, oh, what happened to that?
Well, that used to be $5.
Yeah.
Not $5 anymore. All right. Last one. Enterprises largely adopt augmented generation RAG to reduce hallucination risk.
So RAG is so difficult. Now, the reason why I say that is because absolutely, right? Because you have to give a model context to be able to, especially large language models, right? It's trained over so much information that without any guidance and guardrails, it's going to actually do things that you don't want it to do.
Yes.
Right. So RAG is one of those great tools that you can actually deploy to give context, and you can actually focus that information so that way it's going to give you the information back that you want. So actually over the weekend I was playing with this, and there's the reason not all RAG is created equally. Right. So you can have, like, if you're going through and you're just learning it, and you deploy this, if you actually go through and do a test, it may only be 80% accurate. Right. And then you say, okay, how do I make it better? Right. And through iteration, right, we talked same thing. Through iteration, you'll get that to 95, 96, 97%. But it's also probably going to take a little bit of training as well. Right. So oftentimes I'll play with what's called like a LoRa, like a low rank augmentation, right? So you're not having to train the entire model, but you're just fine tuning it. And between that fine tuning and using RAG, you can actually do something that you would never be able to get with a large language model itself.
100%. And in fact, in this case, I would list this as true, but insufficient. It is what most people are doing with it today. But to your point, I think there is a whole generation of grounding coming up. So it is the answer today, hopefully not the answer tomorrow.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll throw one more statement out there if we have time for you to answer.
Sure.
Cisco AI Defense helps manufacturers by
AI Defense is great. So I look at if I'm a company and I don't have the skills to train my own, even if I do have the skills to train my models, but if I'm going to go through and I'm going to go to Hugging Face and I'm going to grab a model, what does it really mean? How secure is it? Can I inject this and get something else out? Right? It gives you that front line of defense so that way you can trust in what you're actually doing. And it's one of the few tools out there that actually does that. It does it specifically for AI. That does it specifically for the types of tools that we're using today. So if I'm looking at this and if I'm doing it across my entire organization, I want to make sure that I have all of that information so that way I can actually plug those holes. I don't want to. I also oftentimes look at data governance. What are people trying to send to OpenAI? Right? What is the repercussions of doing that? They don't have an account, right? Anything they're sending to OpenAI is going to be used for training, right? We saw this in the early days of generative AI with code being leaked from Samsung, right? So putting in those defenses to make sure that not only are our models working properly, but our employees aren't doing something that's going to also hurt the business with the tools that oftentimes they have available to them is really important. Right?
Yeah, Bob, I'm glad you said that because I love it because a lot of times we kind of talked about this right out of the gate is one of the biggest challenges for C-suites, for executives when they look at AI is just security. And shadow AI is a big one, right? How do I protect against that? And so some of those AI use cases, AI defense use cases are built for things like that. So, and I'm sure it's something that, you guys are seeing when you talk to customers as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, when we're talking about RAG and we're talking about retraining these models, and depending on developers to put the guardrails in really isn't gonna work long term. You need a tool, you need AI to help secure your AI, and that's what I love about AI defense and where that's headed. I really think it's an accelerator for the adoption in manufacturing. Improving that safety that we've talked about, the employee safety as well, so that you can't inject prompts into a model and bring down a factory floor, whether you're doing it maliciously or you're doing it by accident.
Sometimes it's a complete accident.
It can be a complete accident, but AI defense helps with those things. So it's one less thing you have to really worry about if you have that layer of security in place in front of your AI initiative. So I'd recommend manufacturers look at that from the start because you've got some 5 application type packaging now that's, I think, an affordable beginning point for that. And it takes a lot of load off the developers to have to try to build those guardrails and try to speculate because developers, they don't think about that. They don't think about, what kind of guardrails do I have to programmatically put into this today? And that's where I think your system, is going to be an extremely powerful capability for the future for any manufacturer looking to take
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that game between Matt and Richard. Again, for the audience, it was off the cuff. So Matt, nice job. Hopefully we get some kudos or some souvenir for you afterwards. So as I kind of jump into the last question, I just wanted to pause and just first of all thank you, Bob and Richard, for the time today. A really exhaustive, a really exciting conversation with the different use cases in manufacturing. And so as I jump into the last question, you're talking to 500 plus engineers, both within Cisco and also outside of Cisco in a channel partner community. Sentinel being one of our biggest partners. So I'll go to you, Bob, first, and then you, Richard. What key takeaways, maybe one thing that you can tell the audience to take away from this and the Cisco and Sentinel partnership?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, a takeaway would be listen to your customer, right? I mean, talk to them about their business challenges, what they are that they're looking to accomplish. Lean into Cisco and Cisco's resources. You have a depth of resources both from your engineering team, your executive team, you have a whole manufacturing division, you have an OT security division. And I think that Cisco can bring a lot to the table. So listen to what their top challenges are, but help them also speculate what they're going to run into on their journey so that we can help them avoid that. And then you'll become their trusted advisor.
Yeah, at 100%, I would kind of build on that of you've got to look and listen to the unique challenges that really come with manufacturing. And again, see those opportunities with such a broad product line. You can help so many steps in that top floor to shop floor. It really is a golden opportunity. But yeah, listen and understand that they're a little bit different than many other sectors.
Great. Well, you heard it here first of all. Thank you, team. Again, really appreciate the time. I hope you guys are all excited as much as I was as part of this conversation. My name is Zain Mirza. I'm your host. I'm really excited for the conversation that's coming up next with CEW as well. But thank you for your time today.